Hello, everyone. After many technical glitches, I'm here really live. Thanks for joining me this evening. I'm going to have a couple of special people joining me. I'm going to have a special guest host, and then I'm going to have a guest. So I'm going to first bring on my special guest host, Mr. Alex McDonald, and a click of the button, and Alex is
Larry?
here. Alex, I'm doing good after many technical difficulties with not knowing where buttons are. I think I've got everything sort of figured out. The audience is growing. So after the first glitch, I think we're good. And then second glitch during trying to do my countdowns.
Just so you know, we're obviously live on your channel. We're not live on any of mine, and probably not on any of Scott's, because that original link isn't working. You'll have to, if you want him to be able to pair his channels, send him a new link for this particular show.
Okay, I'll do that here in a second. So, but yeah, we've got a nice audience building right now. So, just so you guys know, thank you for joining the show tonight. Alex is here. I'm going to bring Scott on now. We've got Scott Smith coming to us tonight live after being in Atlanta, going back home, and Scott has been struggling a little bit here. He was under the weather with an injury, but he's back, and he came back at it hard. Just like in true Scott Smith fashion. So let's welcome Scott Smith.
Hey, Larry.
Scott, welcome to the show.
Good to see you again, Alex. Thanks for having me. And I believe it's streaming across my platforms. I just checked it.
Okay, that is good. So, well, I mean, just thank you, and people are joining. So, what I want to do real quick here, if I could, if you indulge me for a minute, I want to go and say hi to some people who have actually joined us, because we do this, but we do this because of our friends. Our friends join us, and they're here, so let's acknowledge their presence. Danielle Munoz, welcome to the show, Danny. Thanks for you and Al always claim that you're the worst. No, you're not. I'm the worst. But I do claim to be the most popular podcaster in Rockdale County. But Michelle Freeman, welcome to the show. William Campbell, welcome to the show. Pamela Lowry, welcome to the show. Charlotte Geller, welcome to the show. Mary Boysworth, welcome to the show. My good friend and colleague, Justin Kinney, welcome to the show. Marie Withers, welcome to the show. Cheryl Garcia. Cheryl, I know if you're there, I know Ben is there also. Joanne Elrod, welcome to the show. Gail Davis Owens, welcome to the show. Sarah Crawford, welcome to the show. Luca Russo, welcome to the show. Voices for Rockdale, Miss Corliss Turner, welcome to the show. Hannah Lloyd, welcome to the show. Jacqueline Campbell, welcome to the show, my good friend. I think I already said hello to Bill Campbell, but welcome to the show, Bill, and thanks for joining us here tonight. So, Scott's been MIA for a little bit, but I'm going to turn that over to Scott here in a second. I'll let Scott tell you guys where he's been and a little bit about his issues the last couple of months, because he's been on a roller coaster. But Scott, I'm glad you're back, and I'm glad you're back strong. So why don't you just jump right in there, tell us a little bit about what's had you down, but it's not keeping you down. You're back.
First of all, Larry, I want to say that you are setting a model example for the entire country, being an elected official, having an open show where people can speak up. And I'll go on the record right now, and I think you should run for a higher office. And my commitment is, if once you announce you're running for Congress or Senate, I will commit to somehow establishing a residency so I can vote for you.
I hear you. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start by acknowledging I might not be in Conyers. I want to acknowledge two people that passed away: Courtney Miller from East Palestine and Kenny Johnson, although I never met him. Courtney Miller on East Palestine, I didn't get on the ground until February 22nd, almost 3 weeks after the incident. I was in a matter of days there. She passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 36. She had a lot of health issues, severely impacted, and she posted on X, and I was on the fence about going. So, and what I learned in East Palestine is what gave me the incentive to get right on the ground at BioLab. And she, I promised her family, and especially her mother, that I would never let people forget the memory of Courtney Miller. And then, although I never met him, Kenny Johnson, his testimony, I put the two of them in the same category. What that man did, putting himself out there on the line and exposing what it appears to be significant corruption. And I think some of the stuff he's done is going to be critical as the community moves forward for truth and justice. So I think that's important. And you'll see, I'm going to redo the presentation with you and Alex. We had a town hall on Thursday the 10th. I'm going to be coming back with additional test results and to update the community sometime within the next 30 days. We don't know the date yet because all of this data is still preliminary. There's a lot coming in, and we're early on. And also, and I did some posts on social media, and you'll see in my third slide, on January 7th of this year, I was going to meet a friend of mine that on a regular basis, I always go meet him at a restaurant. And at 11:32 a.m., I was walking by a restaurant that was shut down, that, unbeknownst to me, was pressure washing oil and grease off their machines and discharging in a public walkway. Now, there are laws and there are ordinances, and as I slipped to the ground, I could feel my quad tendon rip off the bone and tear apart, and it's pain like I've never felt. But I was smart enough to call my friend Glenn, who was waiting for me, and I said, "Glenn, call 911, get out here and start filming." And he was filming the whole thing. And why I bring this up is that my empathy and sympathy for victims in East Palestine, Conyers, and anybody handicapped, and what they go through has gone up exponentially, because I can tell you firsthand, I've made the decision, I've never had a personal injury case like all of you guys face from East Palestine to Conyers, but I am experiencing, it's one thing to be, from a distance to see it, but when you experience it firsthand, the gaslighting and the responsible party blaming the victim, it's furious. So I've made my own choice. I'm taking this all the way. I want, and our founding fathers meant in jury, when it comes to the law, to have jury trials with your peers. And I made my own decision. I'm taking it all the way because I'm not going to be gaslit. And in no way, shape, or form am I suffering health issues like those in East Palestine or those in Conyers. It's just me going through this experience has really caused me to feel for the people and try to fight even more. So, and with that being said, to the best of my knowledge, I'm still the first one that's done any testing that has released any summary results, any preliminary results. So, despite being set back by about 3 months with my own injury. So, if you have any questions or you want to go right into the PDF, we can do that.
Let's go right into the PDF. I guess let Alex know what you want to show.
You can
I
start
don't
with
know if
the
you, I
start
don't
with the
know how
first
you
slide.
want to do this, Larry. Make the PDF full screen or what, but so that people can see it clearly.
If I will take me and you off, and then Scott, and the video will be the only thing there. Okay.
You might want to, you can, you know, if you can still hear me, you might want to expand that so they can see the full map.
Is it muting mics when you switch over to it?
Okay,
It
well
is
then
muting mics when I switch
why
over
don't you
to
just
it.
leave it like that so we can all talk? I can talk through it. And this, by the way, on one of my groups I formed, Blue Shirt Justice League, the downloadable PDF in its entirety is right there. Just go to that group and people can download it. So I'll just start talking through it. But this is the first slide from the town hall, which is the 27 data points where I tested from ground zero. And obviously, Larry, it includes your business property. You can go to the next slide. And in this slide, I identify, you know, what I believed from what I've seen on a preliminary basis, some of the hot zones that unfortunately includes where you and Chris Lovejoy are, and also that initial testing I did in the the beginning of the retention pond.
With
Yeah,
the
with
dead
about
frog.
0.3 miles. Now, you and Chris Lovejoy are very important to the community, along with that testing, and that's why in Conyers I was on the ground within 4 days. So in getting these readings, because why are these 3 points important? Because it's the fingerprint. Like, you know, every disaster, every spill has a different fingerprint, and that's really important as we go. In some of my testing goes as far as 30 miles, and we had ash and soot rain down. So we want to take what we found, and there is a slide with your summary testing. We want to take your fingerprint, and then we can match that up. You get into the ratios of these different contaminants. You can match up the fingerprint. Why is that so important? Because for the people looking for truth and justice that may have legal representation, you are going to hear the blame the victim thing about ubiquitous in the environment, even though you didn't have health symptoms before that. You know, you're going to hear that over and over again. And I also want to mention at the town hall where we had at the Fairfield Inn in Lithonia, it's really interesting. The day after, I started to hear from a lot of residents that were affected by BioLab that they had a lot of reactions from that town hall. Now, there was a heavy chlorine smell as you walked into that hotel because the pool was literally across the hall from where the room where we had the event. Then, and I encourage people to reach out, and you know, there's a whole team of people I work with, and I'm happy to help people and make introductions. There is a doctor called Dr. Claudia Miller has something called TILT, toxicant induced lack of tolerance. And that means when you're exposed to a mixture of chemicals like BioLab or East Palestine, you become hypersensitive and have reactions when you're exposed to other chemicals. So I didn't know until the day after that a lot of people were feeling ill after that night. So that could possibly explain why they started feeling that from exposure to chlorine. You can go to the next slide. And that's what I showed for the third day. That's January 15th after my quad tendon tear. And, you know, I wouldn't wish the pain of a quad tendon tear and what I went through on anybody else. And I've already explained this, so we can move on to the next slide. And this is the slide where the dead frog was, and I believe around 0.3, 0.2 miles from ground zero. And I know, Larry, we can talk about this, you know, later and offline about the impact on your business and that discharge in the waterways, because that's key too. But, you know, these volatile organic compounds by definition go into the air quickly and dissipate out of water. So when you see them present in water, it's much more likely than not that it's from from BioLab. And what do we have in BioLab? We don't even know that all the chemicals, but we know there were a lot of chlorinated chemicals. There were a lot of brominated chemicals. What do we know about the chlorinated chemicals? The worst thing for them is a slow smoldering burn that creates dioxins and a whole host of other chemicals like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So that's a problem. But back to these volatiles, we found dibromochloromethane, 4-methyl-2-pentanone, bromoform, and all these in the waterways. So as we go forward and go up to 30 miles out, then we can start working with a team of experts that can take my data and then analyze it and say, what is the fingerprint? How does this break down? You can go to the next slide. And we had Sheena Chambers there, along with you and Chris Lovejoy, Larry. Sheena Chambers, I was one of the first ones to test, and that was the ash and soot that rained down on her property and on so many others. And we established a fingerprint, and being able to figure out the dioxins and some of the other things called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are present. Now, you've all heard me say you can't find what you don't look for. I can't say that enough. It is that simple. And I believe the EPA still said, they tested for asbestos. There was no asbestos. Everything's fine. Your yards are safe. Well, that is typical of what appears to be undue influence from the billion-dollar corporation over the EPA narrative, because there was no asbestos from what I've been able to research in that building, and it was like a styrene compound roof. And when that roof burns, it's going to give off these mixtures of chemicals that we're finding. You can go to the next slide. And this gets into the details. And again, I'm going to go into more at the next town hall. I'll cover this again and any additional data I have. So this, and you can see the detects are bolded. You'll see that, and that helps establish the mixture of the different compounds. And these happen to be the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. You can go to the next slide. And then these are the dioxins that we found at one of the residents. And you can go to the next slide. And this is also some of this slide identifies one of the TCDD is one of the most toxic dioxins, and you can do indexes. And that TCDD or dioxins are basically Agent Orange, and we all know about that. But this particular slide was from a soil sample we did, and this lists all the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and the most toxic one we have here is benzoate pyrene, and that was identified. Next slide. And here we go, Larry. Here is what I would call the dioxin fingerprint, the testing we did from your soil. That picture actually, I believe, is from Chris Lovejoy's, but these are your soil results. But you can see, look at all the dioxins found in your soil. So, and this is why it's so important because you're literally ready. You're basically at ground zero. That's fair to say, I believe.
Well, you know what, I can just tell you, all the water and runoff from over there, the system runs through that property and under the building. So every bit of the runoff water from there runs through that property, every bit of it.
Well, and Chris Lovejoy is, he's not right next door, but he's essentially next door. Am I correct on that?
Oh, yeah, he's right across the road.
So those are a lot of hits. If you see those are all solid hits on dioxins as being present. And what I said the other night, there are only standards for singular exposures to singular chemicals. And you're going to hear not only blame the victim, everything's ubiquitous in the environment, you're going to hear, oh, background, this, that, and the other thing. And we're also establishing controls and background. So what you see here is this broad mix of dioxins right on your property, right in your soil. So this is going to be very useful for establishing a fingerprint in what appears to have been generated from the biolab fire. You can go to the next slide. Now, this is a comparison I did, and those top two pictures are from Chris. Well, the top left is from Chris Lovejoy's property. The other one's is another property where I can't reveal the name, and the other one is from East Palestine. And I did a little comparative analysis on the residues. So you can go to the next slide. And just as a comparison, as bad as East Palestine was, you had, you know, on Chris Lovejoy's property, in dioxin, that's an index, how you compare what's in the residue. It's almost 800% more than what was in East Palestine. And again, believe it or not, we're still very early on, Larry, in this. So this is still all preliminary data, subject to change. There needs to be continued further review and analysis. And we've got a lot more data coming in too. You can go to the next slide. And before I get to this on why furnace filters matter, the mixtures of chemicals, there are no standards for mixtures of chemicals. So when you're bombarded with all these mixtures, you've heard me say this before, synergistic toxicity. Well, a positive example of that is migraines. Sometimes you get migraines if you take a combination of aspirin and caffeine, that gets rid of the migraine. But caffeine without the aspirin without the caffeine won't do it. And it takes a very small trace amount of each combined. Well, think about synergistic toxicity. You may hear from the EPA and the public relations people from the responsible parties like Biolab, oh no, it's perfectly safe, but that's based on a singular exposure to a singular chemical, like, you know, a benzene type compound. The threshold may be 50 parts per billion. It's coming in at 8 parts per billion. Oh, no problem. But it's about the presence. Early on like this is about the presence of the mixtures of chemicals, because what you're not being told is the mixtures, there are no standards. You may have 8 parts per billion of a benzene compound, and you know, you may have 8 parts per trillion of a dioxin. When they mix together, if you were exposed to one of them just on a single episode without a mixture, that's a different story. But we're talking about mixtures here, and that's really important for everybody to understand. Now, why furnace filters matter? You've everybody reporting a lot of coughing, a lot of sickness. So instead of doing a biopsy on their lung, well, it's not 100% perfect. It's the next best thing to try to fingerprint as to what residents were possibly exposed to and what they were breathing in. And here's another thing. And Larry, when you get elected to the Senate, maybe you can write some new legislation. Brian Gullett is an EPA dioxin expert. He's never allowed to speak. He's done a lot of great research. We always have to deal with public information officers that follow the script, just like the responsible party, nothing to see here, nothing is wrong. And he co-authored a paper in 2018 talking about, you know, dioxins from the opening burning. And everyone knows about the vets and the burn pits, and the government was dismissing them. And there was a doctor, Dr. Beatrice Golomb, who I know, who's doing research in East Palestine, and who's done great research. She helped the vets understand these mixtures of chemicals, and it wasn't in their head, as the government said. So she does great research. But back to the EPA dioxin expert, his own paper, this is the EPA, particulates emitted were 2.5 microns or less. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll explain how that ties together. Human hair, 50 to 7 microns. You really can't see much less than 40 microns. We're talking about particles at 2.5 microns. So they're floating around in the air. You can't see them, and you're breathing them in. And even dust is microns, mold and pollen, about 10 microns. You can't always really see that. You can't see it unless it accumulates on your window or something. Go to the next slide. And this just talks about, you know, when you're respirating and breathing in these small particles. And this was from another research paper that showed about, you know, dioxins, how small these particles are. Next slide. And in a lot of my work, I've done some work with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters and HVAC service techs. So I started making phone calls, and you know, when I started in East Palestine, I'm told that I'm probably the only one, probably crazy enough to do it, is to get real world research and testing from actual impact of real world disasters from East Palestine to Conyers. And I've learned a lot about these filters, even these, you know, MERV filters, you know, 12 and around there, less than 20% of the particles will be trapped. So that's where I get into, you don't want to fall into the trap. Oh, it's perfectly safe. You're below the OSHA threshold. It's about what did you breathe in that filter didn't capture. And we know 80% of the particles, what's left on that filter that you were potentially exposed to. That's why furnace filters matter. And again, well, not perfect, but they matter in helping people understand what you've possibly been exposed to, so you can seek at your discretion the proper, medical attention and so on. Next slide. Now, post biolab fire garden crops and residues. I'm concerned about the gardens. We're very early on, and some people watching and listening may have seen some of my social media. In 2024, this is how everything ties together in the world because we're all connected. Some of the world's leading scientists for eelgrass and seagrass at the University of Washington, at Washington State, at San Juan Islands, the eelgrass and seagrass has been dying and increasing. And why is seagrass and eelgrass? They haven't been able to figure out why. And although some of my patents, they saw that it's not directly related to what I do in Conyers, but the point is, seagrass, eelgrass is a plant. And in that research, I was out there, we've been able to identify what appears to be diesel from what may be leaking ferry traffic that's increased dramatically. And seagrass and eelgrass is important, just like your garden, because you got, orchopods out there, and the whole aquatic food chain depends ultimately on the seagrass and eelgrass, one way or another. So what we just found recently in the last 2 weeks is a very sophisticated crop tissue lab. And I had a conference call with them actually on Monday, 72 hours before the town hall. So I have a lot of crops from Conyers in my freezer, and we've got some residents we have some crops that have a control sample that were harvested before biolab and after. What you're looking at in these pictures of the crops, you're looking at a resident that reached out to me that I've tested, and the crops where you could see soot, you could see it dying, and we see this over and over again. And I've told everybody, keep your harvested crops, seal them up, put them in a glass mason jar if you can, seal them in a Ziploc bag, just like your furnace filters, just like the soot and ash. Keep things sealed up properly and to the best of your ability. And I will do what I can. I try to get back to everybody when possible, but obviously I don't always have enough time in the day, especially with some of my other things that I have to deal with. And what you see on the far right here was a residue on a ceiling fan. And fortunately, I could still get up on a ladder there, and I need help, getting on ladders for testing, but I have people volunteering to help me, which is great. But you can see a residue there, and we're going to have that residue analyzed. I hear this over and over again. Scott, there was after the biolab, I never had these strange residues before. I never had crops. I never had these deposits, this black deposit, this substance being deposited everywhere. So I don't believe that's a coincidence, and it just suddenly you had these residues appear within days of the biolab fire. Next slide. And this is my final slide. And unfortunately, this is where you see the responsible parties. Why do these billion-dollar companies like Biolab and Norfolk Southern spend millions and millions of dollars on public relations? Because it works generally. But the great equalizer, Larry, is the independent journalists and people like you. I believe you're setting a new standard for elected officials with honesty and integrity. Every elected official should have a show like yours. And I think you're going to set the standard. And I really mean that. And Jim Morrison, unfortunately, was right. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. But now we have social media as the great equalizer to bring communities together from all over the country. And I'm really proud of the fact that I've done the best to connect people I've worked with and tested in East Palestine to Conyers, because that's why we had all the censorship and the government's so scared, because if millions of us come together, essentially all these elected officials work for us, and we can finally hold them accountable. And I got the 4 Ds of public relations originally from Dr. Petrus-Gollum. I added a 5th, so I now call them the 5 Ds of public relations. First step is delay. Second is deny. Third is discredit. Fourth is dismiss. And then when those four don't work, they start massive defamation campaigns. So essentially, when they start the slander and the defamation, you're onto something. And the closer you get to the truth, the more you deal with these 5 Ds. And that is basically kind of a quick summary of what I covered in the town hall, Larry. So if you have any, and Larry, one other thing before I forget, remember that strange thing that was coming out of your tree? That's in my freezer. And now, thankfully, I'm really grateful for these eelgrass scientists reaching out, because I'm going to have access to a lab I wasn't aware has all these capabilities. In my only experience with crops prior to Conyers and what I've done in East Palestine was the Navajo Nation. You may remember back in 2016 or thereabouts, the Gold King mine spill with the heavy metals. And I was able to work with a lab and help identify metals from that spill going up, but I've never dealt with these kind of compounds. So again, I just found out last Monday that this lab has capabilities to dive really deep into the crop tissue. So I will be able to take out of my freezer remember those weird whitish growths coming out of that tree?
Yeah, I remember that. So I know
so
you
I've
got those samples
preserved.
now.
So anyway, so any questions you and Alex have? Any comments?
Not really questions. Just want to clarify some things. Larry, is it possible to go back to the slide so we can look at, because people are going to download this?
Sure. Let me go ahead and do because I figured out how to do all this, Alex. So let me go ahead and do all that, and then
I'm going to go to. I'm just going to pick.
There we go.
Page.
Yeah.
So
as you notice, I was figuring out buttons, and I know how to do this now.
Scott, let's just, for people that download this so that they understand what it is they're reading, let's talk about some definitions. RL, what is RL?
RL is the reporting limit, and that can change from sample to sample. That means if you're above the reporting limit, it's clearly present at that concentration. If you're between what's called the MDL and method detection and reporting limit, it's more of an estimate, but the compound is deemed present. And that's what that means when you see AJ.
Okay, so when I'm certain people will be downloading this, they'll be able to look at the result you got and then compare that to the
correct.
Okay. All right.
This is how I do it. I mean, these reports are hundreds of pages long, and this is how I reveal the summary reports. And I don't get into all the detailed reports because I'm trying to protect the community. You don't want to get into all the details because they can and will be used against you. But what I try to do is that balancing act is, because at this point, it's about what chemicals were present. It's not about the concentrations yet. It's about what was present and what mixtures were you exposed to. And the whole narrative coming from the PR people will be different, but we can deal with that. Now, if you could go back to go back to the LC one. I want to go back to that slide. And I'm glad you asked this, Alex. Thank you.
Is that this one?
No, that's
no, it'll have LC up there where client example ID, and it'll say LC.
Okay, hold on.
You got it.
No, other way.
DHLC right there.
There you go.
Now you see all those across the board. There you are, close to ground zero, and you can take all those different ratios of what is found, and that's why I keep talking about the fingerprint. But you have, unfortunately, Larry, you have all these what are called congeners of dioxins. They're all present.
Well, and I've told you, and what concerned me about that property the whole time we were there, I mean, we were there for over 10 years, is the storm drain. If we would be in a drought situation with no rain for 3-4 months, and there was a steady flow of water coming through that storm drain the whole time, Scott. So you and I both know where that water was coming from.
That's correct.
Right
now, do you have some of those amber 1 liter jars? Because that day,
I still do have some, yes.
And I will be following up with you on that. And by the way, what I would give to bend my left leg back like that again, I can't get past 65 degrees right now, and it's a major challenge.
So and I was going to let everybody know is I made a decision, and I told you, Scott, back when all this was going on, that we were most likely not going to go back into that property. That we had already relocated temporarily. That I didn't feel comfortable going back there. There were just too many unknowns, and we relocated. And you told me here recently that you felt we made the right decision relocating because, as you defined it, that is the hot zone, and staying there could possibly be been dangerous for my health and the health of everyone else who would work there daily at that facility. And I believe that even without test results, and I think your test results are showing that we made the right decision in relocating and not staying there and buying.
That's
that
correct. And
property.
I know I didn't do any surface sampling inside your building. I did at Chris's but I'm happy even under a secrecy agreement. I'm happy to help you and what you're doing in any way possible. If you ever want me to get into detail or have a private meeting with any of the experts that tested your indoors, because we did see,
Yeah.
we did have hits and detections and concerning compounds we found within Chris Lovejoy's property on the surfaces too. And I'm sure you're going to see the same thing when you get those results.
Well, I mean, my concern is, that stormwater drainage runs right under the building. And then, it's a concern.
Oh
Right?
yeah, absolutely. Now I think again, God bless Kenny Johnson. What a hero. And I've downloaded all his videos and archived them. But I think down the road, for people seeking truth and justice, his testimony and the roadmap he left is going to uncover a lot to help people. You can never fully get your life back, but you can get some justice, hopefully.
Well, Alex, I think you and I had talked about this, or we'd mentioned it to each other, that we know at least one of the fire trucks that the county used over there, they have deemed a
I
complete
did
loss.
not know that. Is that right?
Yeah. So enough for Scott. Now we're
Yeah,
talking about
so-
if that vehicle's a complete loss, what about other people's vehicles that
Well,
were
I
in
know
that
Cedar
area?
Chambers wasn't that
that were-
far away, and I know constant vehicles rusting, eating the paint off. So here we go again. What you will see is the PR people from BioLab will start in with their undue influence over the EPA and all the state agencies will blame the victims. Oh, you dumped something on your car. So, well, they're going to have a lot of explaining to do then with the fire truck. So I'm glad you said that. The public needs to know that, and public records requests. So if the fire truck was affected, maybe that helps explain everything else going on. And also, all these chemical compounds. I don't know if you know this, Alex and Larry, but I just heard early last week that prior to the hurricane, the fire was on September 29th, but BioLab consolidated in that Conyers factory a lot of other chemical compounds that may not have been disclosed. Now, that's key too. We still may not know all the chemicals that combined and created all these toxic mixtures in the fire.
And that was one of my concerns. Well, I'm sure many people's concerns, but it's something we actually talked about on the show. The lack of transparency coming from, everybody involved, quite frankly, but in particular from the BioLab Corporation. One of the questions I asked, when I called their hotline number, one of the questions I asked is what compounds were being stored there, and of course they just would not answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tammy Lynn Freeze want to know if she asked her, did I speak at the event that she attended in December? And yes, I did speak at that event. So, but you're Alex. I mean, if you've got to paint vehicles, and I think you had mentioned this, I think earlier on, if it's destroying the insides of machines and mechanical things, what's it doing to the inside of a human organism? Right. So Scott, I mean, that's exactly what, what some of Scott's stuff said, these things we don't know because it's going to take time. And unfortunately, as this time rolls and we find out what happens, it means people die. That isn't that ultimately
Yeah,
what
I
it
mean,
means,
because it's
Scott?
doing that
We
to the pain
find
in your
out what
cars.
it does
What is
because
it
people
doing
die.
to the inside of your lungs? And you think about this, and I'm seeing some of the comments about I I think almost everyone that was there that was exposed had a reaction from the chlorine from across the room where we gave the town hall. I mean, that's a real issue.
Now they said, let me ask you this: they at the time when all this was going on, they said they were going to do continued monitoring. They even said they were going to do continued monitoring of residents. I'd like to hear from any resident that's been subjected to this continuing monitoring, because I'm dubious whether it's actually happening.
Well, we've got people on the chat that have been impacted and should have been people who were supposed to be continuously monitored. Has anyone in the chat in Conyers
precisely?
been
There's
continuously
Hannah
monitored?
in the chat who has a 3-year-old who was affected by this, and I'm curious if anyone has been I don't want to say inspecting. What's the word I'm looking for?
Read it. Let's put up exactly what Hannah just said about that, Alex. She just commented on that. This is what Hannah said. Look, the EPA told me they don't test air, and
Yeah,
hung
so
up
it
on
was
it.
just it was just the organizations paying lip service to the problem at the time. Oh yeah, we're gonna keep monitoring this. We're gonna keep monitoring the residents, those affected. We're gonna monitor their health. Apparently not.
Well,
let me just say, like I was, me and Chris, right across the road from BioLab. Alex, ask me how many people I've spoke to from BioLab. Ask me how many people have reached out to me from BioLab to see if I'm okay, if our business survives. Ask me what contact I have had from BioLab, the EPA, the state of Georgia, or the county of Rockdale.
What contact have you had, Larry, with, well, quite frankly, anyone, with BioLab, with the state of Georgia, with the EPA? Has anyone bothered to reach out to you?
Not one single person or representative of any entity has reached out to me, one of the individuals and businesses impacted most by this disaster. And not one single individual or entity has reached out because they do not give a damn. And you heard that right here.
you know what, Larry? I
Right?
have a thought. Because you're an elected official, and I meant every word I said. Perhaps maybe one thing considered to do is put this show tonight on a USB drive and send a certified letter to all your elected officials and EPA and tell them you want answers. Because to me, it's just unconscionable and it's totally unacceptable for the taxpayers. What have you been paying all your taxes for? You're being ignored by your elected officials. You're being ignored by the government agencies that are supposed to be helping the community.
Yeah,
It is just infuriating.
There should have been continual medical monitoring for the people that were affected, and the fact that no one's been reached out to is just despicable. And in the meantime, Larry, BioLab are rebuilding and, quite frankly, setting us up for the same thing to happen again in another 5 or 10 years, because this is we can't forget, this is a recurring pattern with this company. And all the bluster at the time from, well, Oz Nesbitt was chairman at the time, talking about, oh, we're going to shut down BioLab, they won't be able. None of that came to fruition.
Hey, I just saw Anna Matson. So she is a big podcaster that can help get the word out. She's watching. Thanks for joining, Anna. And my next trip is going to become in studio on a podcast. I will try to get to you. I will be in touch tomorrow. But thank you for being a voice for the people of Conyers and helping bring people together, because we have to be relentless and we cannot stop until we bring millions of people and hold these elected officials from across the country accountable.
I also noticed, Larry, that the woman that was fire chief at the time of this incident was let go. Do we have any details about that?
Well, Alex, was she let go or did she quit let go?
The press release I saw, I think, said she was let go, but
I think the press release, I think she resigned.
okay. I just
I think it was one of the. I mean, I know about this stuff sort of firsthand. I mean, sometimes people go
well,
away.
when it happened, I was
but before they're
when
let
it
go,
happened, I
right?
was very curious if it had anything to do with
So I think Cheryl said opted out,
Right.
right? So, oh, you know what, Alex, I firmly believe it has something to do with the handling of that incident, right? And Connie says that she resigned. Connie and them get all the records. She resigned before she was let go. I mean that's the reality of what happened, right? So, and I think how she handled the biolab incident played a big role in what went on over there. And I think we receive basic training in the construction industry about chemical fires and about when you have, and we're taught never to use water on the chemical fires, and it depends on which what our chemicals that we have are, and we have to make sure we have the right fire extinguishers for what we're carrying
Right.
and what we have, because not all fire extinguishers, the components inside work on what you have if it gets on fire, right? So and one of the things that we're taught in our industry is don't use water on any of our chemical stuff because it'll actually make the situation worse. Scott, what happened in Conyers when they put water on the
You just
biolab?
made it, and you just made it worse. And again, that low smoldering burn like East Palestine, even though they blew up those tank cars and it was bad and they shouldn't have done it, the low smoldering burn with the chlorine compounds created a lot of those dioxins. And Larry, I'm just seeing some of the East Palestine people are making, like Tamara Lynn Fries. I don't know if Jamie's on tonight, but I have a suggestion for another show of yours. You may just want to get a couple of residents like Tamara and Jamie from East Palestine on with residents, so they can talk and they can share their stories for the community to see. That might be helpful.
And Anna Matson brought up a good point, and I knew about this too, and it's something we had talked about, Alex. I think you and I may talked about on one of our shows too, is that they had determined that there was
Right.
a leak in that warehouse, and then she's right. Instead of fixing the leak, just like you have a fire watch, they established a fire watch program where they brought on extra personnel to monitor the warehouse because they had the odor in there and knew they had a leak, instead of determining what was leaking and stopping the leak. They just put extra people in there to
Right.
watch for fires. I mean, and you're right. Thanks, Anna, for bringing that up, because we have so much ridiculous stuff that happens here. One forgets about some of the nonsense that we've dealt with, and that was in a report that they put out there that they had, and that was in the report. They had the extra people on monitoring the leaks, and they had noticed it months earlier, Scott. So, I mean, this is incompetence, incompetence, and you were setting yourself up for a disaster. You blew up a building in Louisiana in 21. You blew the building up here at Conyers 20 years ago. They've had countless other fires at other locations, and you've got a leak in one of the buildings, and you don't think this might not end up being a fire?
Well, this goes to what
point?
Kenny Johnson said. I mean, it's all about profits over people. And, BioLab's $1 billion company. They could have easily prevented this with training and having competent people, instead of taking always cheapest way out of things and compromising the community. It's just really disgusting.
Well, the fact that they're not required to have the correct fire protection methods in place
It-
is insane to me. You know, if you're a private company and you run a server room, you know, you're expected to have a halon system. You know what I mean?
Uh, Alex, if OSHA comes and I don't have the right fire
Right.
extinguishers on my truck, we're just a little company. They're going to hit me
Yeah.
with $10,000 fine. I'm just point blank, right? I don't have a 20-pound fire extinguisher, and they're going to pop me
Yeah.
for 10 grand. And what? But BioLab just got popped for what? You cause multi-millions dollars of disturbance in a community, and you get a
But they
$60,000
had a
fine
water sprinkler system for chemical storage.
for
We're
chemical
required to
suppressant.
have
Yeah.
specific extinguishers for, you know, specific purposes, and it seems like BioLab weren't. Something there's a breakdown. Something broke.
Oh, well, they weren't required to have it from the get-go.
Mhm.
That was the
Yeah,
problem.
it's
You know,
unacceptable.
I mean, they weren't required to have a storage tank there with the proper suppressant that fed that would have fed the sprinkler system.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? With the right fire suppressant. That's the way you should do it.
It's
Correct?
exactly how it should be done. It just and you know, after I remember when you and I talked about this, Larry, and I brought up the photographs of the fire, and I said, "Oh, hold on, that's my mistake. Those are my photographs of the fire 20 years ago." And yet, after that incident 20 years ago, they still weren't required to have the correct fire suppressant system installed.
Well, and this, to my knowledge, okay, the first fire, they actually did get the fire department from the airport to bring the correct
Right.
suppressant. Okay. But to my knowledge, the second fire, they never brought the
No,
correct
they just kept dumping
suppressant
water on it.
ever. They never brought the correct suppressant to
Mhm.
extinguish the fire. Scott, can you believe that?
Unfortunately, I have to say yes. You know, I've over the last 25 years, there's nothing that doesn't surprise me. I hate to say that.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. You know, we have to get inspected every year for our fire extinguishers. Where was I'm sure BioLab were inspected, but why were they cleared for chemical storage without the correct remediation?
I think the answer is pretty simple. It's about, because what I hear, and I don't know the community clearly like everybody, you guys do, and people that live there, is that BioLab is the biggest taxpayer of the county. It's like 1 million, like 990,000 and change or something like that. That repeatedly gets stated over and over again.
Hmm. Yep, follow the money, right?
And it's always, and unfortunately, that's always a problem, right? When you've got a large taxpayer, and that things get overlooked, looked the other way, and not even looked at at all, right? And that's just that happens. That's the bottom line. Money, like Geo Goodrich just said, yep, that's the bottom line. Money is the bottom line. And you know what? And that's the sad thing, and you just mentioned it earlier, is we put this stuff over the lives of people. People's lives don't matter, and that's ridiculous. Because in my opinion, there's people ask me, well, why do you have government, right? Government should only exist to be able to enhance and improve the lives of its citizens. When government stops being able to improve and enhance their life, then there's no need for government. That's my personal take on it. And when the individuals who are serving are no longer to do that, then those individuals don't need to serve anymore. That's my opinion. That's just, and that's why, I'm a turnkey person. I believe, you give somebody an opportunity to do what they say they're going to do. And when they don't perform quit electing the same people to office to keep letting you down. You don't have to continue to allow them to let you down. Just don't vote for them again and elect someone else and give them the
Hey,
opportunity.
wait, do you
to
see
let
what
you
Cheryl
down.
Garcia just said? The last inspection was done when the building was 80% vacant. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They had no idea what was stored there. Oh, and I remember because I was across the road and would come to work daily and watch them, put that building up, and it went up rather quick, Scott. Right? And that was amazing. That was amazing. It just, yeah. I mean, it's just crazy when you see this stuff, and a lot of people, like, I'm not a conspiracy person. Alex will tell you this. I'm not a conspiracy person, right? But when you see nonsense like this, then you have to say, well, you know what? I think there might be conspiracies.
It's not a
You know what I
conspiracy,
mean?
it's truth. When everything is, they're all,
But right. Yeah, you're right. Well, it's just that, one hates to believe that their government is purposely doing things that would harm them, right? And then when you see things like BioLab, you see through their negligence that yes, government has purposely done things that ended up harming people. And it's through negligence and looking the other way. And it's not acceptable. And we can't continue to accept.
Well,
this behavior.
Marie Withers just made a comment that's spot on. I mean, how much responsibility does Rockdale have for this, the county, for letting it go on?
Mm. I mean, I think the counties, I personally think the county is going to find themselves in some of these suits that are eventually going to climb their way to the court system. What do you think about that, Alex?
I mean, this is an issue we've talked about a lot, right, Larry? I understand where Marie's coming from, but how paranoid do we need to be when we consider zoning, right? That whole area, well, I don't know about the whole area, but the area is an industrial zoned area. Industrial zones can be dangerous. I'm not, don't take this as making excuses for BioLab, because it absolutely isn't. But I'm trying to take a much wider view of this. Industrial zoned areas can be hazardous. You can't stop growth. You can't stop progress because the potential for danger exists. What the solution is to mitigate that danger, and that just didn't happen here. Now, who's responsible for that is the question. Was the fire department responsible? Because isn't it the fire department that does the inspections? Is the county responsible because they do inspections? Is the EPA responsible for not inspecting? I don't know whether they did. I shouldn't say for not inspecting, but is the EPA responsible for letting things slide if they inspected the property? I have absolutely no doubt that the county is going to get dragged into some of these suits. The county have their own lawsuit right now against BioLab, don't they? They're suing.
The county is also suing BioLab, and we've got to remember the technically, in my opinion, I think the county's suing themselves because the development authority actually owns the property.
Right. That's right. Yes.
And the development authority is an arm of the Rockdale County, whether they want to admit it or not. They are an arm of the Rockdale County government. That's just reality, right? So, and I even had heard that, they were at this meeting and some people on the development authority were a little upset at the county because they said, well, you're just suing yourself. Some of them actually told them that, right? So yeah, I mean, because, and that's my concern about when tax dollars are used to finance these type of businesses, then yeah, we may have a little more say in it, Al. If we're actually, we're paying taxes and we're actually helping finance it, through bonding, through the authorities and such. It gets a little sticky, it's a little nasty. Scott, and you've probably seen this through your in stuff you've done throughout the country. It's all intertwined, and that's how it gets a little nasty, and nobody, everybody's, circling the wagons.
I call it an incestuous revolving door, all interconnected, where everyone's feeding off it, from all the agencies, state, local, to elected officials.
It's tricky for the county, right? They want to bring in, they want to grow, they want to bring in businesses, because that helps, with the taxes, and quite frankly, the more businesses that move to Rockdale, theoretically, the less taxes residents have to pay. But then you have to, if you start opening up to committee, right? If yes, the taxpayers are funding it, but if you give all the taxpayers a voice, we know what happens, Larry. We end up with absolutely nothing. We get no growth whatsoever.
Yeah, and that is a problem, because that's one thing, you can't be against everything. And that's what happens
in
here
Rockdale
too.
is that everybody is against everything.
Yeah, and they're against everything because of how they've been treated
I don't
the last
blame
2 decades.
them.
But that's why they're against, because the elected officials have just been gaslighting them so bad. Scott, one of the things our former chairman here would say, well, this ain't Mayberry no more. But you know what the problem with that statement is here, Scott? Most people moved here because they wanted to live in Mayberry, right? So you had some elected officials who wanted to make Rockdale County a small Atlanta simulator, which it was never going to be, because we don't have the infrastructure, don't have the land mass. So they had a vision for something that it was never going to be when it was already what it was going to be. A nice bedroom community that could support certain types of businesses, and they just were not willing to admit what the community really was.
They severely miscalculated what this community is. They built that industrial park over there that's sitting empty. I mean, what did that cost us, Larry?
Exactly.
But to kind of follow up a little bit what Alex is saying, you can have a Mayberry-like community and bring businesses in. All they got to do is comply with common sense safety laws and regulations. Like, I'm no sprinkler expert. They could have invested in a dry sprinkler.
I agree.
I mean, you can't, you're still going to be very profitable, but why do you have to put the community at risk? I think positive. I think there could be a win-win. Little bit of Mayberry and a little bit, and have businesses and lower taxes. All they got to do is follow the law.
But that's what we talked about too, Scott. We actually tried to push that type of growth, but when you've got people that are more concerned, you got the second smallest landmass county in the state of Georgia, and during a 10-year cycle had so much percent of land deals going on. The government buying all this land up from individuals. In what world does that make sense when it's the second smallest landmass county in the state of Georgia, and the government is buying up land? You're taking land off the tax rolls. So who benefits from the government buying land and taking it off the tax roll, Scott? Government officials through backdoor deals. That's who benefits.
If the government officials don't sell out the community, that's a big part of the problem.
It is. It's a big part of the problem. And you had government officials who weren't listening to citizens here for 2 decades.
Yeah.
Right. The 2 decades I've been here. Right. And that's why you've got this community who doesn't trust they don't trust elected officials. They don't trust the government, because they've been misled. I'm not even going to say Alex, true. They've been lied to. They have been lied to for 2 decades. And Scott, they're hungry for truth, right? And that's what we and then you had this incident happen here, and it just compounded the situation even more, with people even not even going to look at trying to believe anything anybody said, because they're just used to being lied to. And if it's coming out of an elected official's mouth, it's immediately, well, that's a lie. They're saying it.
Yeah.
How do
yeah.
I know? How do I know an elected official in Rockdale County is a lying? They're breathing.
Yep.
That's how you know, right? So I mean yeah, I'm talking
Yeah.
about myself.
No, you're not talking about yourself.
Well, I know, but you know what I mean? I'm one of them, but they get mad at me because I'm not sticking to the, to the family thing there. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. I didn't run for office to be popular with elected officials, right? I ran for office to try to help people, right? And to try to do something for the school system here in this county, and that's why. But I think a lot of people, they run for office for one reason, and then they find out maybe they can line their pockets, and I think people get more concerned about lining their pockets than they do what they said they were going to do. And then I think a lot of them, their intentions are to line their pockets anyway. And we've talked about the average salary of someone in Congress is under $200,000 a year. But as soon as somebody's been there at least 6 years, then their net worth is usually around $10 or $15 million. How does someone making $170,000 a year end up being worth $10 to $20 million in 6 or 7 years? You answer that question, right? How does
is it the lottery? They win.
How do you do? Yeah, they did win the lottery when they got elected to Congress, right? That's what I think, right? That's what I believe. So, Scott, what do you think? Anybody who lives in what certain area around BioLab, should they really be paying attention to their health? Really be paying attention to to things that don't. What is that zone that you consider
that's a great question.
Scott, and while you answer this question, Larry, let's go back to the slide and show the first few pages, the maps that people didn't get to see fully.
Okay, and I'll make everything work.
Some context here.
Yep, you go ahead and do that.
And again, I say preliminary because right now I have only 27 data points, and there's a lot more coming. But we know 20 to 30 miles out, people reported illnesses. We know they had soot and ash from BioLab invading and raining down on their property. And the hot zone may change, Larry. I mean, there's little doubt in my mind at this point that you, Chris Lovejoy, and the immediate surrounding area is a hot zone. And oh, good. You see that? Yeah, you see that?
Say that
the red arrows point to the 27 data points. You can see the red air right to you see like the burgundy red. That's ground zero right beneath Old Covington Road.
Yeah, right there. Any of the stuff that's right there on Olympic Court, that industrial park where I'm at, going down to that retention pond with the frog area, all the businesses in that area are in that.
Yeah, and then you look at all the red areas are areas that appear to be, expanding the hot zone. But the wind patterns, nothing's in equilibrium or a steady state, and the wind patterns change. And like in the lower left, you've got soil, alarming detections in soil we saw, and crops on that lower left. And and then above where above the arrow, you got that red arrow immediately north of where you and Chris Lovejoy are. You got soot and ash there that was deposited, and other residues that are concerning. And then you go a little bit east and north up there. So now, and we see some areas 15, 20 miles out that look okay. But again, whether I say something looks okay, everything is preliminary, because why? I don't have all the testing that I've done in. I don't have any crop testing at this point. I'm still waiting on some more results, and we need to do more testing. So I would say my recommendation for people is listen to your body, listen to your family. If you started feeling ill after the biolab event, if you continue to have symptoms, you probably know something isn't right. And I haven't tested the volatile organic compounds are the easiest ones to game, and they don't stay around very long. That's why I try to get there as fast as I could and test that water close by. But we need to the next phase
Uh,
to really know the impact too will be getting up into people's attics and their venting systems and doing some surface analysis.
Samantha Swaney asked, "What did the little blue markers mean exactly?"
Oh,
Scott, that's what she.
the little blue markers are where I sampled. That's a data point. And the red
Yeah,
areas is where I saw causes for concern. You know, clearly you and Chris are in a love zone. I mean, Chris Lovejoy are in a hot zone, and you know, and the red arrows show where I'm concerned that the hot zone is expanding.
yeah. I mean, and I like I said, I firmly believe that that whole business cul-de-sac right there on Olympic Court, uh, the Black Lawn Olympic Court, that whole little area, because all that um, stormwater just flows through that whole area, and a significant rain now, that whole area floods, right? So it's all underwater. So that's it is, and you and I, and that's just spreading contaminants
Yep.
through
Yep.
everything, and that's why I really consider that whole area, in my opinion, that whole industrial area, complex, in my opinion, that whole area is a hot zone. It's just, I mean, because what one has, the other has, unfortunately. I mean, that's just that's the reality there. I mean, it's the truth. So, but yeah, I I think this is something that this community has gone through. People out of sight, out of mind sometimes. Um, but I think when you come back into town, Scott, and we have shows like this, and people realize it's not going on right now, but the residual effects are going to impact this community for years. And that's the reality, that this community is going to be impacted for years by that incident. And then Alex brings to light the fact that a rebuild will do nothing more but be at some point being a repeat of what happened back in September again to this community. But we've had the building blow up back in 2000. We had the building blow up last year. We've had fires in between the building blow up. So when a new building goes up, you'll have a few fires, then the building will blow up again. That seems to be the pattern. So, it's what's going to happen unless something changes. That's the way I see it. Scott, I'm going to let you close this out. We're going a little over. I'll let you have some final words, and I'm going to let Alex, say something. Let's go ahead and,
I would
what do you
just
got to say?
encourage that don't give up. There's strength in numbers and communities and people are coming together from not just in Rockdale County, from all over the country. And this is just beginning. This fight for truth and justice is just beginning. And please, everybody, document everything. The most important thing is the health for your family, your children, your grandchildren. If you're feeling ill, if anything at all, seek medical attention right away. And then as far as evidence, soot, ash, furnace filters, weird residues, people can reach out to me privately on Facebook or social media, and I do the best I can to get back to people. And don't give up, and there will be truth and justice.
Alex, what are your
I have to echo
words?
what Scott said. You have to fight. If you're an individual, a family that was affected by this, you have to fight, because these people will steamroll right over you given the opportunity. I don't know what the status is of any of the people that signed up with the attorneys that came in that came in right after actually that we warned people about right after the fire took place. I don't know if any of those people have received any compensation or what's going on, but you just keep fighting. Hell, it may end up taking years, and hopefully you'll get justice, you'll get what you deserve, but don't give up. As overwhelming as it might begin to feel, don't give up.
And I'm in agreement with all of that. And you can't give up. I'm involved in a lawsuit thing right now. We're not going to give up. Not going to stop. If it takes whatever it takes, it's what it takes. You know what I mean? It's the long haul, right? So that's my opinion about it. I just think that as long as there are individuals like myself, Alex Scott, and just all the people from East Palestine and the Cheryl Garcias and the Walter Bannisters and the late Kenny Johnson and just people who are here fighting for the community and exposing things that are going on. That's what we need to do. We need to continue these things. We need to continue to have shows like this and discuss this issue periodically so that it doesn't go away, so that it is on people's minds and we remember what happened and why it happened, because that's why history is so important, right? We teach history so we don't repeat history. Yeah. That's why you teach history. You teach history so you don't repeat history.
It's important to keep pressure on the county as well. If biolabs start storing chemicals there again, put a little pressure on the county for regular inspections to make sure that they do have the correct fire suppressant systems in place, so that, God forbid, there is a fire, they can deal with it immediately, instead of having to go through this for like the 5th time.
And if you've got a leak, then no, we're not going to put a bunch of people in there and watch it leak. You got to get everything out of the building. You got to relocate everything. If you've got a leak, it all got to go. I mean, you know what I mean? Let's put some real consequences to actions. That's what you have to do. So Tamara Freeze, yeah, I mean, reach out. We definitely do a show sometime. I'm be glad to have you on as a guest on the show at some point. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's what we do. We have shows like this, and we have people like us that come on these shows, and we talk about these issues, and we highlight things so that you are able to know what's going on, and you're able to actually get some information. Because, right, Scott, if we didn't get this information from you, then what information would there be out there, people? Zero. There would be zero information about something that is so significant that happened in a community, and you would have no information. So you have to hold business and you have to hold government accountable. And it starts with you, and it starts with us putting pressure on people. So I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. As usual, it's been great to having you all join us. I will be back next Sunday at 8 p.m. We'll go a little local Rockdale. Got some local issues going on. We'll talk a little local Rockdale and see what goes on here and stir some people up about some local stuff. So thanks, guys.
Thank you,
I'll see
Larry.
you next week.
Thank
and
you.
You guys want to hang on? We'll chat before we leave.